There is no betrayal more piercing than the one that comes from within your own home. When the very people who should nurture, protect, and uplift you become the architects of your suffering, it shakes the foundations of your soul. There is a wound that does not bleed, yet aches in ways words cannot describe. A wound inflicted not by the hands of a stranger, but by those bound to you by blood. You have searched for answers, replaying moments, questioning your worth, wondering if you were the problem all along. But the truth is far more profound than you have dared to imagine. The scriptures speak of Joseph, a man chosen by God, yet despised by his own brothers. Why? Not because he wronged them, but because of what he carried within him. A dream, a destiny, a divine favor that set him apart. And so they cast him into a pit, sold him into slavery, and thought they had erased him from their lives. But they did not know that rejection is often the seed from which greatness grows. Have you ever considered that your rejection is not a curse, but a mark of divine selection? It is a bitter truth that sometimes the ones closest to you will be the first to betray you. They see your light, but instead of celebrating it, they attempt to extinguish it. They see your kindness as weakness, your ambition as arrogance, your calling as a threat. And so they push you aside, not realizing that in their rejection, they are positioning you for something greater. Think back to your childhood. Were you always the outsider, the one who felt different, the one who questioned what others blindly followed? Did you find yourself yearning for love that never came, seeking approval that was always withheld? Have you wondered why your victories are met with silence, while your struggles become their entertainment? Could it be that your existence disrupts the narrative they have written for themselves? Cain hated Abel, not because Abel wronged him, but because his offering was accepted by God. Saul despised David, not because David sought to harm him, but because God's anointing rested upon him. Jesus himself was rejected by his own people, those he came to save. Rejection by family is a pain that echoes throughout history, yet it is not without purpose. Have you ever considered that your rejection is evidence of your distinction? Some of you have spent years trying to mend relationships that were never meant to be whole. You have silenced your voice to make others comfortable, shrunk yourself to fit into spaces too small for your calling, carried burdens that were never yours to bear. But what if I told you that your rejection was the very thing leading you to your destiny? What if the pain you have endured is preparing you for something far greater than you can imagine? Look closely at your life. The patterns are there. The favoritism, the gaslighting, the dismissal of your achievements, the twisting of your words. They have convinced you that you are unworthy, difficult, or simply not enough. But the truth is, they fear you. They see in you something they do not understand, something that reminds them of their own limitations. And instead of embracing you, they exile you. But here is where the tables turn. What they meant for harm, God will use for your good. The rejection you face today is carving out a path that no man can take from you. The same brothers who threw Joseph into the pit had to stand before him in need, not knowing that the one they discarded would be the one who held their future in his hands. The same people who mocked Noah had to watch as the rain began to fall. The same family who cast you out may one day have to watch as God elevates you beyond their reach. So what do you do with this pain? Do you allow it to consume you, or do you let it refine you? Do you let their rejection define your worth? Or do you embrace the truth that you were never meant to belong in places that cannot contain you? If your own blood has rejected you, perhaps it is because God is preparing you for a different kind of family, one built not on genetics, but on purpose. This is not just about betrayal. It is about revelation. It is about understanding why you were set apart, why the people closest to you turned their backs, why your love was not enough to make them stay. It is time to stop questioning your worth and start recognizing the divine strategy behind your rejection. It is time to break free from the chains of seeking approval where it was never meant to be given. But how do you know if this rejection is part of a greater plan? How do you discern if what you are experiencing is a divine sign? Let me share with you 7 undeniable signs that reveal the true reason your family rejects you. They downplay your achievements but celebrate others. It is a heartbreaking moment when you achieve something significant, only to be met with silence from the people you once hoped would be your loudest supporters. You worked hard, you sacrificed, you persevered against all odds, yet the very people who should take pride in your success seem indifferent, or worse, dismissive. Have you ever noticed how your family treats the accomplishments of others with admiration while treating yours as if they are insignificant? Have you wondered why the moment you rise, they suddenly turn their backs on you? This is not by accident. This is not a misunderstanding. It is a pattern, one that runs deep, one that is spiritual. Joseph's brothers did not hate him for anything he did wrong. They hated him because of the favor upon his life. They saw something in him that reminded them of their own limitations. They saw the coat of many colors, not as a mere garment, but as a sign that he was set apart. The moment you start stepping into your purpose, the moment you begin to shine, the people closest to you may feel threatened. Instead of celebrating you, they seek to diminish you. The reason your achievements are downplayed is not because they are small, it is because your light exposes what they refuse to confront within themselves. You represent something they cannot understand, something that disrupts the roles they have assigned within the family. If you were once the quiet one, the overlooked one, the one who struggled, they grew comfortable seeing you in that position. The moment you break free from that narrative, they act as if your success is nothing, because to acknowledge it would mean they must also acknowledge their own stagnation. Look at David. When the prophet Samuel came to anoint the next king of Israel, David's own father did not consider him worthy of standing among his brothers. Jesse called forth every other son, except David. The rejection was not because David was unworthy, it was because those around him could not see his divine calling. And when David later stood before Goliath, his own brother Eliab mocked him, accused him of arrogance, and tried to send him back to the fields. Why? Because some people can only accept you as long as you remain small in their eyes. Your achievements threaten the way they see themselves. When you grow, it forces them to confront their own lack of progress. When you rise, they feel as though they are falling. And rather than looking inward and seeking their own path to elevation, they find it easier to tear you down. But here is what you must understand: God's calling on your life does not require their approval. You were never meant to receive validation from those who cannot see the vision God placed in you. Your success is not defined by their applause, and their silence does not diminish your worth. In fact, their rejection is often the very proof that you are walking in divine favor. When Jesus performed miracles, healed the sick, and taught with authority, his own people rejected him. They murmured among themselves, saying, "Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother Mary?" Matthew 13:55. They could not reconcile the greatness of his calling with the familiarity of his presence, and so they dismissed him, not because he lacked power, but because they lacked the ability to see beyond their own limitations. Your achievements, your elevation, your growth, it all makes them uncomfortable, because it serves as a reminder of what they chose to neglect within themselves. But you must not shrink to fit into spaces that were never meant to contain you. If they cannot celebrate you, it is because they were never assigned to your destiny. God will raise voices that will honor your work. He will send people who recognize your worth, and he will ensure that your success is not hidden, even if your own family refuses to acknowledge it. But the question is, will you allow their rejection to stop you? Will you let their silence define you? Or will you rise, despite their dismissal, knowing that God's plan for you is greater than any validation they could ever offer? They gaslight you into believing you are the problem. It starts subtly. At first you think maybe you misunderstood, maybe you overreacted. You recall the words they said, the way they made you feel, and yet when you confront them, they twist the story. They make you question your own memory, your own emotions, your own reality. That never happened. You're too sensitive. You always imagine things. Suddenly you are not sure what is true anymore. You start to doubt yourself, your worth, your sanity. Gaslighting is not just manipulation, it is spiritual warfare. It is a deliberate attempt to confuse you, to weaken your sense of self, to keep you in bondage. When family members gaslight you, They are not just dismissing your feelings, they are distorting reality to maintain control over you. They want you to feel small, unstable, powerless, because if you ever recognize the truth, you would break free. Jezebel was a master manipulator. She used deception and control to bend people to her will, twisting narratives, turning people against one another, all to maintain power. Some families operate in the same spirit. They refuse to take accountability for their actions, shifting blame onto you, making you believe that you are the one at fault. If you feel isolated, confused, emotionally drained, it is not because you are weak. It is because they have spent years conditioning you to doubt your own perception. The enemy thrives in confusion. If he can make you believe that you are the problem, he can keep you from realizing your true power. If he can make you second-guess yourself, he can prevent you from stepping into the authority God has given you. This is why the enemy often works through those closest to us, because their words carry weight. Cain did not just kill Abel, he tried to silence the truth. Abel's offering was accepted because it was righteous, and rather than changing himself, Cain sought to eliminate the one who exposed his own shortcomings. Some family members see your honesty, your purity, your faith, and instead of embracing it, they seek to break you. They would rather convince you that you are difficult, ungrateful, or irrational than admit their own faults. But you must awaken to the truth. You are not the problem. The discomfort they feel around you is because you see through the illusion, because your presence disrupts their false sense of peace. The moment you stop doubting yourself, the moment you step into clarity, they lose their hold over you. Remember how the Pharisees reacted to Jesus. Every time he spoke truth, they twisted his words, tried to trap him, accused him of blasphemy. Not because he was wrong, but because they could not handle the truth he carried. When people cannot handle truth, they attempt to discredit the one who speaks it. But here is what you must remember: your clarity is your power. The moment you stop believing their lies, their control is broken. The moment you see their manipulation for what it is, you step into freedom. They may never admit the truth. They may continue to twist your words, deny your experiences, and make you feel as though you are the villain in their story. But you must not let them redefine who you are. Stand firm in what you know. Stand firm in the truth that God has revealed to you. Because when God sets you free, no lie, no deception, no gaslighting can keep you bound. And that is what they fear the most. They exclude you from important family decisions and events. Have you ever felt like an outsider in your own family? Have you noticed that when important decisions are made, whether about finances, family matters, or even simple gatherings, you are left out? You find out after the fact, as if your voice, your presence, and your opinion hold no weight. It is not by accident. This exclusion is not just a family dynamic, it is a spiritual pattern that has existed for generations. The enemy operates through isolation. If he can make you feel like you do not belong, he can make you doubt your worth. If he can make you feel like an outsider, he can make you question whether you were ever meant to be part of this family. But what if I told you that this rejection is actually a sign that you were set apart for something greater? Look at Joseph. His brothers made decisions about his life without him. They plotted against him, threw him into a pit, and sold him into slavery, all without his input. He had no say in what happened to him. But what they did not realize was that their rejection was aligning him with his destiny. They thought they were getting rid of him. But in reality, they were pushing him toward his purpose. There are times when God allows rejection to protect you. Have you ever considered that the very discussions you were excluded from were actually meant to keep you from harm? That family business deal that you were never invited to, perhaps it was meant to fail. That family gathering where they whispered about you behind closed doors, perhaps God was shielding you from their manipulation. David was not invited when the prophet Samuel came to anoint the next king. His own father did not see him as worthy of standing among his brothers, and yet David was the chosen one. Sometimes the people around you are blind to what God sees in you. They look at the outside, at status, at family tradition, but God looks at the heart. They exclude you because in their eyes you are insignificant, but in God's eyes you are destined for something far greater than they can comprehend. The exclusion is painful. It makes you question your place in the family. You sit at the table and feel like a stranger. You hear them laugh, share secrets, make plans, and you wonder why you are always the last to know. You replay every moment, searching for what you did wrong, what you could have done differently to earn a place among them. But the truth is, no matter how much you try, you will never fit into a space that was never designed for you. Jesus himself was rejected by his own people. He came to his own, and his own received him not. John 1:11. Imagine that the very people he came to save turned their backs on him. They shut him out of their conversations, their synagogues, their society. But that rejection was necessary for the fulfillment of his purpose. If they had accepted him, he would never have been crucified, and the plan of salvation would not have been completed. If your family excludes you, do not beg for a seat at their table. God is preparing a table for you in the presence of your enemies. Psalm 23:5. The very people who shut you out today may one day have to watch as God elevates you beyond their reach. Stay faithful. Do not let their rejection define you. Because when God calls you, no amount of exclusion can keep you from what is meant for you. They criticize your growth and ambition. There is a strange reaction that happens when you begin to grow. The same people who once supported you, who once laughed with you, suddenly change. They say you have changed, but what they really mean is that you have outgrown the box they put you in. Have you ever noticed how some family members encourage you when you are struggling, but the moment you start succeeding, they become distant or even hostile? The moment you start improving yourself, making progress and reaching new heights, they begin to criticize you. You think you're better than us now. Why are you doing all this? Stay in your lane. They are not angry because you have changed. They are angry because your growth reminds them of their own stagnation. Jesus faced this same reaction. When he returned to his hometown to teach, the people were astonished and said, "Isn't this the carpenter's son?" Matthew 13:55. They could not accept that he had become more than what they expected of him. They had grown comfortable seeing him in a lesser role. The moment he stepped into his calling, they rejected him. This is what happens when you grow in an environment that was never meant to contain you. Your progress becomes a mirror, reflecting what they could have done but chose not to. Instead of celebrating you, they try to pull you back down to where they are. Some will mock you, others will belittle your dreams, and some will try to discourage you altogether. But here is what you must understand: their criticism is not about you. It is about them. It is about their fear that if you succeed, they will have no excuse for their own failures. It is about their insecurity, their unwillingness to change, their refusal to step outside of their comfort zone. Look at Nehemiah. When he set out to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, his enemies Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem mocked him, ridiculed him, and tried to discourage him. They could not stand to see something great being built because it exposed their own failures. But Nehemiah did not stop. He refused to come down from his work just to argue with small-minded people. If your family criticizes your growth, do not waste your energy trying to explain yourself. Some people are committed to misunderstanding you. No matter how much you try to reason with them, they will twist your words, find faults in your progress, and seek to undermine your efforts. Not because what you are doing is wrong, but because they cannot handle the fact that you are moving forward while they remain in the same place. Joseph's brothers did not just hate his dreams, they hated what those dreams represented. They saw in him a future they could never have, a destiny they could never touch. Instead of striving to grow themselves, they sought to destroy the one who was growing. And yet, what they meant for harm, God turned into good. If they criticize you, keep going. If they mock you, keep building. If they reject you, keep growing. Their words hold no power over what God has ordained for you. Remember, the tallest tree faces the strongest winds. The higher you rise, the more resistance you will face. But do not let their voices drown out the voice of God. Do not let their negativity distract you from your assignment. Because at the end of the day, it is not their approval that will determine your destiny, it is God's calling upon your life. And no amount of criticism can change that. They compare you unfavorably to others. Comparison is a weapon often used to diminish a person's sense of worth. When your family constantly measures you against others, whether it's a sibling, a cousin, or even a neighbor, it is not because you are lacking, but because they refuse to acknowledge your uniqueness. They act as if no matter what you do, it is never enough. You grew up hearing it. Why can't you be more like your brother? Look at your cousin, he's already successful. Your sister never gives us this kind of trouble. And so, with every word, they carve doubts into your mind, making you believe that you are somehow inadequate. But let me ask you this, if God created you to be unique, why are you being measured against others? Saul compared himself to David and grew bitter. When David defeated Goliath, the women of Israel sang, "Saul has slain his thousands, but David his 10,000s." 1 Samuel 18:7. Instead of celebrating the victory, Saul was filled with envy. He saw David as a threat, not because David sought to take his place, but because David's success highlighted Saul's own shortcomings. This is what happens when people compare you unfavorably. It is not about your failures, it is about their insecurities. Some families do this not to motivate, but to manipulate. They withhold approval, making you believe that if you just become like the person they admire, then maybe, just maybe, you will finally earn their love. But that day never comes. No matter what you achieve, they always find someone better to compare you to. The truth is, they see your value, but they do not want you to see it. So they disguise their envy as advice. They make you feel small, so that they can feel in control. They push you toward an impossible standard, so that you never feel truly at peace with yourself. But listen carefully, God did not create you to be a copy of anyone else. You were designed with a purpose that is yours alone. Your journey is not meant to look like your siblings, your cousins, or your neighbors. The enemy wants to keep you distracted, chasing an identity that was never meant to be yours. But when you break free from that comparison, you step into your true calling. Look at Moses. He was not like the other Israelites. He was raised in Pharaoh's palace, but chosen to lead God's people. His journey was different. Had he spent his life trying to be like his Hebrew brothers, or trying to fit in with the Egyptians, he would have never become the leader God intended him to be. If your family constantly compares you to others, understand this: you are not in competition with anyone. The only person you need to outgrow is who you were yesterday. Their approval is not your purpose. Their validation is not your victory. You were never meant to fit into the mold they created for you. You were meant to rise above it. They only contact you when they need something. There is a painful realization that comes when you start noticing a pattern. You only hear from them when they need something. They never check in on you. They never ask how you are doing. But the moment they need a favor, a loan, or someone to fix their problems, suddenly they remember your name. This is not love. This is convenience. Have you ever noticed how the prodigal son in the Bible was celebrated when he had wealth, but abandoned when he lost everything? The moment his money was gone, so were his so-called friends. Luke 15:11-16. They were not there for him, they were there for what he could provide. This is the reality for many people who are used, not for who they are, but for what they can give. It is a painful cycle. They ignore you when you are struggling. They act like you do not exist when you are in need. But the moment they find themselves in a crisis, they suddenly remember that you are family. They come with sweet words, with emotional manipulation, reminding you of your duty, your responsibility. And if you refuse, you are suddenly the selfish one, the ungrateful one, the heartless one. But let me ask you this: where were they when you needed them? Where were they when you cried yourself to sleep? When you faced rejection? When you struggled to make ends meet? Where was their love then? Judas walked with Jesus, ate with him, sat at his table. But when it came down to it, Judas saw Jesus as nothing more than an opportunity. He sold him for 30 pieces of silver. Matthew 26:14-16. They are not with you because they love you. They are with you because of what they can gain from you. And when they no longer need you, they discard you. They forget your name. They act as if you never mattered. But here is what you must understand: God does not call you to be used by people who only love you when it is convenient. You are not a resource. You are not an ATM. You are not a tool for their benefit. Some of you have spent years giving and giving, hoping that one day they will see your heart. You have sacrificed, thinking that if you prove yourself enough, they will love you for who you are. But the painful truth is, some people only see you as an option, not a priority. Look at the story of Samson. Delilah never loved him, she only wanted what she could get from him. She kept pressing him, manipulating him, using emotions as a weapon, until she finally got what she wanted, the secret to his strength. Judges 16:4-21. The moment she no longer needed him, she betrayed him. If you feel like your family only reaches out when they need something, recognize this pattern for what it is. True love does not only come when it is convenient. True family does not disappear in your struggles and return in your success. You must set boundaries. Some people will call it selfishness, but it is not. Even Jesus set boundaries. When he needed rest, he withdrew from the crowds. Luke 5:16. He did not let people drain him completely. If the Son of God knew when to step away, why do you believe you must always be available? If they love you, they will value you, not just what you provide. If they care, they will show up not just when they need help. You do not exist to be drained by people who do not pour into you. Stop breaking yourself to keep people whole. If they only call you when they need something, it is time to recognize the truth: they do not value you. They value what they can take from you, and you deserve more than that. There is a pain that cuts deeper than words, a pain that does not come from strangers or enemies, but from the very people who should have stood beside you. When your family rejects your faith, your values, and the principles that shape your life, it can feel like you are walking through the world alone. You sit at the table with them, but there is a distance that no conversation can bridge. They dismiss your convictions, mock your beliefs, and treat your devotion as if it were a weakness rather than a strength. And so you begin to wonder why. Why does the very thing that gives you strength seem to drive them further away from you? Why does your faith create a divide instead of unity? This is not a new struggle. It is a battle as old as time itself. From the moment light was separated from darkness, a divide has existed between those who walk in truth and those who resist it. Jesus himself warned of this, saying, "A prophet is not without honor except in his own town, among his relatives, and in his own home." Mark 6:4. The Son of God, the one who healed the sick and raised the dead, was rejected by his own people. They could not see who he truly was because they were too familiar with who they thought he should be. And this is the root of the issue, isn't it? Your family remembers who you used to be. They remember the version of you that fit into their expectations, the version of you that conformed, that agreed, that followed without question. But now you have stepped into something greater. Your faith has transformed you, your values have set you apart, and suddenly you are no longer easy to control. They cannot understand why you no longer laugh at the same jokes, entertain the same gossip, or indulge in the same habits. They take your refusal to compromise as an attack, your discipline as judgment, your conviction as arrogance. They reject your faith because your faith convicts them. Every time they see your devotion, it reminds them of what they have neglected. Every time they hear you speak truth, it exposes the lies they have embraced. It is not your words that offend them, it is what your life represents. When you choose to live by a higher standard, those who refuse to change will always feel threatened. Cain hated Abel not because Abel wronged him, but because Abel's sacrifice was accepted by God while Cain's was not. Instead of changing, instead of seeking righteousness, Cain chose to destroy the one who reflected his failure. This is what happens when your family rejects you for your beliefs. They see your faith as a challenge to their comfort, your obedience as a threat to their way of life. Instead of seeking the truth for themselves, they lash out at you, hoping that if they silence you, they can silence their own conscience. You may have tried to explain, tried to share your heart, tried to help them see what you see. But no matter how much you pour out, they remain hardened. They roll their eyes, they dismiss your words, they label you as too extreme, too different, or too much. And the more you grow in your faith, the more distant they become. You have felt it in their tone, in their sideways glances, in the way they speak about you when they think you are not listening. They say you have changed, but what they mean is that you are no longer easily controlled. They say you are too focused on your beliefs, but what they mean is that they cannot manipulate you the way they used to. They would rather you blend in, stay quiet, be like everyone else, because your presence reminds them that there is a higher standard, one they are unwilling to acknowledge. Some of you have tried to win their approval. You have softened your convictions, hidden parts of yourself, and downplayed your faith just to make them comfortable. You have stayed silent when they mocked your beliefs, ignored the disrespect, and tried to be what they wanted you to be. But no matter how much you bend, it is never enough. You still feel like an outsider, still feel the sting of their rejection. And maybe, in your weakest moments, you have wondered if it would just be easier to go back, to blend in, to become who they expect you to be. But you were not called to fit in. You were called to stand apart. You were called to be a light in the darkness, and light will always make the darkness uncomfortable. They rejected you not because you are wrong, but because your presence exposes the truth they do not want to face. Jesus told his disciples, "If the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first." John 15:18. If even Christ himself was rejected for standing in truth, why should you expect anything different? It is painful when the people who should love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. You long for acceptance, for understanding, for a family that embraces who you truly are. But some families are not built on blood, they are built on purpose. Sometimes God removes people from your life not to punish you, but to protect you. He knows that some relationships will keep you bound, some environments will stifle your growth, and some connections will pull you away from Him. And so He allows the rejection. He allows the distance. He allows the pain not to break you, but to refine you. Not to leave you abandoned, but to place you where you truly belong. Because there are people, true brothers and sisters in faith, who will see you, who will value you, who will walk with you in truth. God never removes something without replacing it with something greater. You may feel like an outcast now, like you are wandering through the wilderness alone. But do not be deceived by what you see in the natural. God is leading you to a place where you will be embraced, where your faith will not be a burden, but a blessing. You do not need to dim your light to make others comfortable. You do not need to shrink yourself to fit into places that were never meant for you. Rejection is often redirection. When your family rejects your faith, it is not a sign that you are on the wrong path. It is confirmation that you are walking in purpose. Stand firm. Do not compromise. Do not let their rejection shake your foundation, because in the end, it is not their approval that will determine your destiny. It is God's. When the people closest to you turn their backs, when the ones you love the most reject, belittle, and dismiss you, it is easy to feel abandoned. It is easy to wonder why God would allow such pain, why He would place you in a family that does not see you, why He would let the people you have given your heart to treat you like an outsider. But listen carefully, your rejection was never about you. It was about what you carry. Joseph was thrown into a pit by his own brothers, but that pit was not his end, it was his beginning. David was overlooked by his own father, but that rejection did not change the anointing on his life. Jesus was betrayed, abandoned, and despised by his own people. But even their rejection could not stop God's plan. The pattern is clear. When you are chosen, rejection is part of the journey. You have spent too long trying to be understood by those who were never meant to understand you. You have poured love into people who refuse to receive it, and you have sought validation from those who will never give it. But today it is time to let go. Let go of the need for their approval. Let go of the idea that their acceptance determines your worth. Let go of the pain that has kept you in chains for too long. Because what they meant for harm, God is turning for good. What they used to break you, God is using to build you. Their rejection was never meant to destroy you, it was meant to position you. You were never meant to fit in, because you were created to stand apart. And when God sets you apart, no amount of rejection can change what He has ordained. So stand firm. Hold your head high. Walk boldly into your destiny, knowing that those who left were never meant to go where God is taking you. Because your future is not in their hands, it is in God's.